Okay, welcome to our first podcast. My name is Chris,
Jamie over here.
and we're going to be talking about lots of different issues from politics to technology to business, fun social things, whatever happens to pique our curiosity, and we hope that you're entertained by it.
Little bit of mix of everything, So, and we also really want you guys to comment and, throw your input and also input for other shows. We're willing to do the research and try to bring you what our opinions are on it. If you like them, you like them. If you don't, you don't.
So, Jamie, last week you were down in Kentucky at the Bourbon Trail. Is that what it's called, the Bourbon Trail?
Yeehaw! We were down there drinking bourbon. Yep, we went to about 9 distilleries of the 18 on the trail.
And so you guys have a trail, so there's like a path that goes down the road. You guys do like a
I did not see
coach ride or
I
something?
did not see any kind of path, but I did see a lot of people on buses that were smarter than us, being able to drink a little bit more and I guess get into the moment, right?
And so how many things are on that? How many stops are on that? And these are all distilleries, right?
Yeah, after doing my research when I was down there's about 60 altogether in the state of Kentucky. There was 18 that were on this particular trail, and I don't know if it's a west trail, east trail, but it's like Wild Turkey, Four Roses, Castle and Keys, I think was one of them. They were all pretty interesting
And so
places.
I've heard a lot of people talk about this. So did you meet many people? Were they from all over the states, the people that you did meet?
Yeah, we tried to talk to people, sitting at the bar having a cocktail. My preferable cocktail was a Manhattan, and it's amazing how many different tastes you get with a Manhattan and the bourbon. But yeah, we met people from all over, even people from other countries. Just walking the trail and driving the trail or getting a ride on the trail.
And so Kentucky's a big state. Does it go from one end from the east end of Kentucky all the way to the west?
Well, we were
or-
right around the Lexington area, which I think Lexington and Louisville have a huge conglomerate of these. I did not make it down to Louisville or over to Louisville. We drove through it, getting there, but never went back. And there was, I guess, 3 good distilleries along that.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting to see how all this stuff is made, from the mash and, how everyone has a little bit of a different concept or, a different twist on distilling the bourbon,
And so some of these are big, like high-profile distilleries, and then there are some that are the smaller shops, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
like
The
when
more-
Wild Turkey for one, huge. And, it's funny how they all have their own little story, right? Like Wild Turkey, and I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was, but it's now been passed, not the distillery itself, because it's a lot of these things are foreign owned at this point, which kind of takes us into a different realm. Like, are we selling out as United States, citizens and business owners? Are we selling out to foreign entities more than we are selling out to our own, entities here in the United States? But the same distiller guy that did it, and his name was Jimmy at Wild Turkey, has passed it on to his son Ed, or Eddie, or whatever they call him down there, who worked in the warehouse, and now he's become the distiller and has made his own bourbon and his own recipes, and kept the old Wild Turkey recipes as well. So, but it's interesting. I mean, they all have their own intricate story to tell, right?
So it's interesting. I had no idea that there was all this foreign ownership of these distilleries. You'd think that these are just Kentuckians, whatever, old Scotch and Irish folks who've lived there for a long time. But so what kind of countries are buying these distilleries and running these things?
Some Irish, some French, some, a little bit like the one was owned, where I'm thinking, Wild Turkey was owned by Campari, so I'm not sure who Campari. I know Campari as the alcohol, but I don't know where they're located. But you can see the same thing happening with the beer companies in the United States. They're all being kind of bought up by their own foreign entities. I don't think Budweiser is Budweiser really anymore. And I think it's a South African brewery that owns them. I may be wrong about that. It may be.
Yeah, they were bought out a number of times.
Yeah,
Could be though.
Yeah, yeah. It's all like they're twisting in the wind, trying to.
Multinationals.
Yeah, it's got to be a profit in it, but.
So then, so how many total are out there? How many distilleries are part of this tour?
Well, I think it said 60 altogether. And some of these are like, one we stopped at was and this was actually the funniest one, is if you ever heard of Old Crow. Do you remember Old
I have
Crow?
heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah, well, Old Crow sold out to, I want to say it was Jim Beam or something. And we got this little girl that walked out, and she was kind of funny, and she was picking on a friend of mine, and we were kind of, every time we go somewhere, we were making it his birthday, which I thought was kind of funny. And
So you get a free shot there?
yeah, no, we didn't get any. I don't think we got anything free. I think they maybe torched us for a little bit more money on that. But she was comical, and I guess so. The Old Crow sold out and I want to say it was Jim Beam. I'm not sure. Don't directly quote me. Someone maybe in the comments, if put it in there. But they sold out the old recipe or they sold out the name to Jim Beam, but not the recipe. And this place, and I can't remember what it's called, but I can tell you one of the bourbons that they produce now, and they were a very low producer of bourbon. They produced maybe a 3/4 of a barrel a day, and the one that they used the Old Crow recipe in was something now called Flipping the Bird. Yes, that's correct. Flipping the Bird. And their label is upside down, and it's supposed to be kind of them flipping the bird to these bigger distilleries, which I thought was kind of an interesting, twist. I guess they got a cease and desist order from the people who own Old Crow when they were producing it. So they actually had to change the name. They changed it from Old Crow to something that was close. And now they, since they were pissed off about getting the cease and desist order, they made it Flipping the Bird. So
funny stuff.
Yeah.
So another topic that we were talking about is AI. So you said that your kid thinks that AI is a temporary thing. Is that correct?
Well, it's funny because I said to him, he's in school right now for programming, right? And he's got this year to go. And I said, man, you should make your concentration in AI. Because, and it's funny because Chris and I go back and forth and we banter about AI almost every time we talk about something that's AI related because we both find, there's a huge interest in it. But it's funny. I had listened to another podcast that had talked about AI being the Manhattan project of today. Mm-hmm. Because everyone is at a race to score, the next big thing or the next. How are we going to use AI to maybe destroy, our enemies or destroy, something or to make something better. And let's hopefully we go in the other direction, but I feel like a lot of the time we're going in a direction that we don't really want to go down.
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of people, and you get these folks who are saying, AI is going to put so many people out of work, which it probably will.
I've heard anything from 40 to 85% of jobs.
There could be. And just one of my explanations is that we have to embrace this technology because just like there were a lot of people who were so worried about computers when computers came around, and they were saying, it's going to put everyone out of work, everyone's going to be unemployed. But it really took us on this hockey stick of productivity where we went, we were coming down and all of a sudden we shot up with productivity. And then the internet came around and people were worried again. And once again, some jobs did go away because that's just how we evolve as people.
Right.
And once again, the internet, took us on another hockey stick where we're chugging along, and then we just shoot straight and shoot up with a lot more productivity. Could you imagine, without the internet? If you listen to some of those folks back then, and Jamie and I have been active internet developers for 30 years now. So I can't imagine being without the internet. We used to have to go to the library, wait for the library to be open anytime we needed some information.
And then you had to do the Dewey Decimal System, which I never figured out.
Right, exactly. So you're screwing around with all that, and now, so now we're looking at AI. I think the big difference is that it's going to take us on this hockey stick again in productivity because, I mean, we've used it for video, for music, images, programming, copywriting. There's so much there, and it's going to take us on this hockey stick once again. However, the big
exponential growth,
and the big difference is it's coming fast. This is coming way faster than the internet and computers. Those were decades in the making.
And wait until AI starts correcting itself,
right?
And you think it's fast now, it's gonna go through the roof.
And that's why we're seeing Nvidia stocks go crazy because all these companies like Grok, ChatGPT, Anthropic, all these companies.
What do you think? Is there room for all of them, or do you think there's room for all those companies, or do you think it's like, hey, this is going to go to the top. Grok's going to be the number one, and everyone's going to use that, kind of like Microsoft and Windows.
Right, and I think that if knowledge becomes ubiquitous in certain ways. With these, I think the competition is always good because number one, these products do have a price tag on them, so you need the competition in that respect.
But you got capitalism in that thought, right?
These guys, I mean, right now, I can go to Claude, which is Anthropic, and ask it for one thing, and ask the same thing to Grok, and ask the same thing to ChatGPT, and get 3 totally different products. Especially when it gets down to programming, I'm seeing different styles of coding. I'll give it the specifics. I'll say this kind of programming language. If I'm using a database, this kind of database system. If it's HTML or CSS or JavaScript, all this other stuff. Give it all the details, but it all comes out in its own way, basically. And some of the code is glitchy, and some of the code's not so glitchy. But in the end, we have to remember that the AI stuff, this is scraping information off public sources, basically, and that's how it's building this information. And so, so I think, I mean, for those who are worried about it, I think there's a reason to be concerned, but I think universities, high schools have to really start focusing. For years they've been teaching, well, this is, we're going to have a class on Microsoft Excel or how to use Microsoft Office, whatever, Google Suite.
It's funny you bring that up. Like, I've taken some Excel documents, and instead of having to program them direct, I'll give them to AI and go, hey, spit out an Excel sheet for these numbers and what they're supposed to do. And I'll get an end product to it. I mean, it's almost like, the development aspect of that is huge. And, my kid thinking, programming is the way to go, man, I think you're going to be out of a job, unless you start, analyzing it far past the programming and start analyzing how the AI system interprets and, what would be the best path for that AI to interpret what you want done.
And one of my things regarding, I think there's always going to be a need for the programmers. However, I think it's a matter, kind of getting back to the whole school thing. It's a matter of how you manage the AI. You have to know how to give it specific commands. And so if you want to program, because I tell people, like, I can do this program, AI will do it 1,000 times faster than I will, but there are going to be glitches. Nothing's going to come out exactly the way I need it. So then I need to know the programming language or the database, structure, or the different details of a program in order to be able to go in and do my own customized tweaks. And, if it's after the fact and you want to add some other feature, you could go back to the AI and say, here's all the code you just gave me, but can you add this function? Or if it seems like that's not a realistic thing to request, you got to know how to program to be able to add your own code into that. So
have you had much luck with that? Because a lot of times I'll put something up there for it to change. And this could be in, developing even an image, right? And I'll say, this is a great image. I'm like, can you create this without this? And then all of a sudden it goes into, and maybe I'm typing in the wrong thing to get it to do what I want to do, or the wrong commands. But it'll spit out, and I like the previous image, and it'll spit out a completely different image with a completely different information set.
And that is interesting because I think out of all the toughest stuff that I've dealt with AI is definitely images. And images and video, there's a lot to it, just like they say, an image is 1,000 words and stuff. And so there are a lot of different ways you can go with an image, but I have to say it's gotten a lot better. I think back about a year and a half ago, I would give these AI tools a command. I'd say, give me a picture of a good-looking young couple standing in front of a red brick colonial house. And it would spit out, it usually gives you like 2, 3, 4 different images to pick from. And the faces were pretty good. They were pretty realistic. The bodies looked pretty good, except for, when you look at the picture, you'd see like 6 fingers or 3 fingers.
I've seen that.
And then you see like, if I say like holding a key.
Or they're placed in awkward positions, juxtapositions to each other, where it's like, wait a minute, why is his leg wrapped over her leg and under the other leg? It's like, makes no sense. I mean, this isn't like Pamela Anderson doing Tommy Lee or something.
And so you don't see that as much anymore. I mean, It's like, I always anatomically correct, I think, they've really improved on that, I think. The thing about, I'd say, like, I have him holding a house key or something. The key would just be dangling in space.
I've seen that.
So, yeah, I mean, I haven't, done a ton of imagery lately, but the stuff that I have done has been pretty realistic. It's hard to tell that it's not a real picture.
Well, and then I start to wonder, are people going to think, like, is it pulling someone else's face into this? Where you're going to start getting people going, wait a minute, why is my face on that golfer,
Yes.
Or why is my face on the sitting holding this key, that you were talking about?
And that's possible. I mean, I guess anything's possible just because you have...
run facial recognition on it.
You're just scraping the internet for details. But,
right.
At this point, they've got these, I think this would apply as large language models that really apply to a lot of content that comes out of AI. And so maybe there is like a certain formula that may happen. They may say, okay, give me this kind of person. They may say, they may have definitions in the background that say, okay, this is how we're going to create this person. But, some of the AI stuff too that I think is, I was talking to a friend's kid who's going to work for this one university to help them develop educational tools in AI. And I think that's really cool because, when you and I went to school, we'd sit in lecture halls, 200 kids, one professor, he's just shooting out like exams or whatever. And sometimes you'd have writing assignments or whatever. But the goal of this one university that he went to is to build tools that can enable these professors to customize plans and strategies for individual students. So if you have a tool, so teachers, say it's midway through the semester, you have a midterm exam, you have some homework pieces, you can feed that into some type of AI system and it comes back out. And maybe it creates a report where the TA sits down with the student, or maybe it's a customized email that gets pumped out directly to the student to kind of like identify what kind of learner they are, where their weak spots are, where their strengths are, and how to capitalize on that instead of just one guy talking to this mass saying, just take these multiple test exams and, you pass or you fail, whatever.
Right.
So I think hopefully it enables these students to get a lot more out of their education.
Well, it's funny you talk about students and education, right? And I've heard that, AI is becoming like the new brain drain, right? Where a lot of these kids are just using the AI to get through school and have it write a paper or, and I know there's ways to check against that, but there's also ways around that as well of getting that paper, so it doesn't look like it's copywritten or written by some other source. I know my daughter uses it all the time to study for, her exams. But I'd hope she wasn't using it to write a paper, but you just never know. And that's what kind of scares me is if you use it in the brain drain method, like you just use it to answer all your questions. I heard one person refer to it as like Ask Daddy, you know. And I remember when I used to run a company, and everyone would come in my office and be like, "Oh my gosh, you know, there's a problem here." And it was like I was AI for them, right? You know, they were like, "Well, you know." And then I figured out, okay, you create a binder and you put all these questions in this binder, and every time they come in your office, you go, check the binder, you know. So you try to compensate, and maybe this will get real market specific. Like, you know, mine was a manufacturing / distribution company, and maybe it'll get real specific to like this AI is only used for your business, right? You know, it's like every question you have that X business AI will answer for you because it's already been answered in the background. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually with some of these, so when it gets to students and how they behave with AI, there are certain ways that they're definitely building a lot of tools to try to minimize, the kids just going on and say, "Give me a 500-word essay on the Revolutionary War."
Don't get me wrong, I would have done it myself.
Yeah.
I actually used something called Prodigy to do a lot of research. You know, back when Hector was a pup.
So I guess from what I've talked to with other AI people, they say, well, you know, because, you know, this gets back to those large language models and how they say, okay, when we build our results and we have this big amount of data, these massive libraries that say, okay, so if I use these two words, what usually comes next? They'll say, oh, the largest percentage of time this next word comes through or something. It builds these models to help
almost statistical data saying this is what's going to be relevant in the next.
Right, exactly. And so it'll take some of the data, you know, it'll take the information that you give it and it'll come out. And so if a professor says, give me a 500-word page essay on A, B, and C that happened in this year, and this year. If the student copies and pastes that into AI, looking for the quick out, there's a big percentage of time supposedly that it really just reproduces the same thing. So if you went to an AI site and typed in something, and I went to an AI site, I typed the same thing in verbatim. There's a percentage of the time when it actually spits out the same exact thing because it's using the same formula. Right. You know, and it may change. You know, it may change week by week because these things are always learning.
Right.
You know, things are always growing. But so that's one of the ways I think professors are probably feeding their stuff into AI to see what comes out. And then they're comparing it with some of the students. I'm thinking that's my guess. So,
right. And they probably do those search parameters and see what statistically pulls up. Right. And if the thing starts almost the verbatim to what it's telling you, I would think that would be a pretty good thing to go. And is that considered copywritten?
Right.
It's not, because now the law is, you know, it's not like somebody else wrote it. It's been statistically made up. So it's not necessarily copywritten, correct?
Right, exactly. And so I remember early on, I think it was the New York Times was trying to file a lawsuit, and they may still be litigating it against ChatGPT, saying, well, you're just scraping all of our content that people normally pay for and things like that.
Right.
So
all these politicians that have written these speeches that have copyrighted everything, now AI is your hero.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
Joe Biden, go for it, buddy. Because I think you were one of the main offenders of that.
Yeah, he had to jump out of the 1988 presidential race.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And wasn't it a Ronald Reagan speech or something?
It was a British guy.
Oh, it was that's right. Right. That's funny.
So
different topic, different day.
You know, so with some of those thoughts with your kid, the idea that this is a temporary thing is, you know, it's not even on the radar. I mean, because this stuff is changing mankind and it's taking us to a much higher level. And these companies are investing billions and billions of dollars on this stuff. You
Yeah,
look
it's
at
amazing.
it was about a year ago or so. I think Elon Musk had opened up his Grok facility down in Memphis, and he was saying, "Oh, we've got 100,000 GPUs," and that was just a shocking number to think about. GPUs being graphic processing units, where this is where a lot of when these are these are very powerful processing cards. They're not just for graphics, despite the name. It's like when people talk about Bitcoin mining and that, you needed strong GPUs. Well, maybe not for Bitcoin, but for like Ethereum or some of the other ones, you needed strong GPUs to process a lot of data really quickly. And so it is. You have 100,000, and then within like 6 months he came out and he's like, "Well, we're bumping that up to 200,000." And then all of a sudden you're like, and then you look at NVIDIA and they say, "Well, about a couple of years ago, we had, we had cards that were taking 250 watts, and then we went up to 400 watt cards just for one GPU, and then it's 600 watts, and now they're looking at 1,000 watts, or even 2 points, or even higher." So. And then you think about it, so it's like someone like Elon Musk just invested in 200,000 GPUs, and then all of a sudden these graphics cards, as they're building these things, this technology is going so quickly.
Right.
Does he need to buy 200,000 new ones that are the latest?
What do you remember the days
ones?
of like the 8088 and the those computers that were like basically paperweights today? But it was like they were changing every like 3 months. They're like, "Oh, we got the next one. We got the next one. We got the next one." And it was like you were constantly trying to catch up. I mean, if you were interested in that.
For a long time, they were saying that with PCs that they would double in power 18 months or so.
Yeah, okay. What was it, 18
and then
months?
finally,
right?
I think it started plateauing once people like you and I, who aren't sitting there gaming, didn't really need the more power. I mean, we're working on documents and mundane stuff. So as these AI facilities grow, I mean, they're building these massive facilities with massive processing capability, and then they're looking at power. That power is like one of the biggest factors.
Were we just talking about 3 Mile Island?
3 Mile Island, yeah. So Microsoft is taking over 3 Mile Island, evidently, because they're going to put that nuclear reactor back into works, because they're going to need a lot of gigawatts of power to run their AI system.
Reminds me of Back to the Future. Gigawatts.
So, and it's just so funny because 3 Mile Island is obviously, taboo in so many like ways because of the memories. But
maybe they'll take over Love Canal. Isn't that what Love Canal was too? It was a fallout center.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right on that.
Well, they can load that up too,
But that's the only way we're going to be able to handle the power. I mean, these guys, I think they say that like 1 gigawatt, is enough to handle most, like an average city. And so some of these AI facilities are looking at 10 gigawatts of power.
Yeah.
So
wow.
They're just going to need a lot of power, and there's no way that solar or wind or clean coal or whatever.
Yeah, this is far past the flux capacitor. Far past.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, so anyways, that's where we're at with AI, and I think it's exciting. So.
It from my perspective, it's super exciting. The great thing about it is being able to handle mundane tasks. Like email response, which I'm sorry, everyone who I haven't returned your email. I plan to use AI, so just know it's me, but not me, right?
Yeah, I have a friend who actually got an email from a customer a couple weeks ago, and it was really funny because he called me up, and he didn't call me up about that, but we're talking, and he's like, "Yeah, so I just get this email from one of my customers, and you can see that they did it from AI because it said begin paste here and end paste here. They forgot to cut that piece out of their email." So,
damn it, caught again. I hope that wasn't me.
Right, exactly. So just another use that you can have for AI. I guess.
Mundane tasks I love, right? It's like now we're doing a deep dive into that. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, on another topic, I was reading a story the other day about this kid who stole a plane
Out of Georgia, right?
out of Georgia
Yeah.
and flew it to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so Jamie's a pilot,
I'm
so he
pilot.
knows this
Yeah.
Very well. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there are a lot of issues in the airplane industry these days. So did you get a chance to read that article at all? Or?
I did not. I did breeze through it, so I do know some of the details. I know he got quite a bit of time for 18 months, was it?
That's a big, yeah. I mean, I guess you put a lot of people, when you're talking planes, you put people's lives
Wow.
at risk.
And the thing is, he turned off the transponder,
Yeah.
so they
Could
couldn't
have been a terrorist.
track him. Right. He could have ran that into a building. I mean, it's been done before, right, people?
Right, exactly. And so it's, you see the transponder turned off. I bet they alert the Air Force right away.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to enter some airspaces without a transponder, so
Okay, so obviously you've had a couple planes, and I mean, with a Tesla, you start your car with the phone. With other cars, you start with a key. How does someone just jump in a plane and take off?
the funny thing, and I don't know if I want to release this to the world, but a lot of these planes, one, they're easily wired. Two, a lot of these guys leave the keys in them. I know that sounds stupid, but like mine is sitting in the hangar behind us, and it's got the keys in it 24/7. I don't hide the keys for anything, but
it's a locked
But
garage.
you gotta break into this, and then we got a fence on the outside. This is a highly protected area. We actually have something called Area 51 right down the street from us, which isn't the Area 51 you think it is. But I think there's more military might in that little hangar than probably what the local National Guard has.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, including jets.
So this guy down in Georgia, the owner of the pilot, probably just left the keys in the ignition.
Well, was it a school or was it? I didn't read if it was a school or if it was.
I think the kid learned.
Private owner.
I think the kid had taken lessons at this specific airport, so maybe he was familiar with it. and-
I'm completely surprised he survived. Because taking lessons with an instructor versus having the knowledge to take a plane and feel secure and go into the pattern and make the calls, which probably he didn't make any calls is my guess. And I've heard people when I'm in a pattern not make calls, and then you got to look on your ADSB and see where they're at in the pattern and and go, and you're always kind of cursing at them. At least I am, but
Yeah, and so I don't know if the Air Force was called or not, but
yeah, I don't know if anything was scrambled, but
when the transponder
with the
goes off,
transponder off, you can't really see the guy.
very, very, very suspicious. But you'd think that they would call
By
his
radar,
fighters
you
out.
could.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about 9/11, with the jets, I think the jets were getting ready to take these planes out of the sky so they
Oh yeah.
would minimize.
Yeah,
the
I
deaths.
watched a story about a young lady who was in one of those jets, and really they had no armament on the airplane, so she was gonna put her life and ram the jet,
Yeah, it's-
and take it out. And God bless her, she's all right, and she's here today. But I only know that being a Purdue grad, she was a Purdue grad as well.
And so this guy flying the plane, though, this is just maybe a single passenger plane. I mean, that's where he really puts his life at risk because no one's going to, any military guy he's not going to think twice. I'm gonna take this guy out. I don't know what he's up to.
Right.
He's up
Well,
to
if he
bad
was
stuff.
doing something malicious, like flying towards Washington, D.C., or something to that where they were picking him up on radar, but I think he was really going from really one uncontrolled airspace to another. I'm not sure without.
So just
excuse me,
these
reading the-
small airports, you're saying.
Yeah. And what did he go to South Carolina and then he went
North Carolina, I think.
North Carolina and then he went back. Yeah.
Maybe,
So he
yeah.
kind of went and he went out of Georgia.
Right.
So he had to cross a whole state, right?
Right. So,
Yeah, and a couple parcels of states. So yeah, as long as he's not flying through that airspace, no one's really gonna complain. And there's still planes that fly around without transponders. Don't get me wrong; they're all over the place.
And so you said that this is like uncontrolled airspace. These
Yeah.
airports. I thought like almost any airport has.
Well,
certain
some are
control.
and some aren't. It just depends on where they're at on that
Right.
airspace level, right?
Right, because I always thought, as a person with a drone license,
Yeah.
I always thought, if you're within 5
Well,
miles.
I
of
mean,
an
it's still
airport-
controlled, but it's uncontrolled. Like no one's sitting there going, "Chris, you're flying around.
Okay.
I'm gonna bust you out."
So there are
right?
rules.
There's totally rules
this
in
guy
those
didn't care
areas.
about
Yeah,
rules,
but obviously, when you either hotwire an airplane or you steal the keys, I mean, pretty much you're on your own and you're rogue at that point, right?
Right. Okay. So, speaking of like some of these airports, Sean Duffy, transportation secretary, I mean, he jumped into a situation that was really kind of a shit show. So now he's talking about upgrading all the software, all the
Oh,
computer
about
systems for this
time.
air traffic control, because I think some of the stuff's been around.
I'm
since
going to
the
tell
80s,
you,
right?
the FAA is the most backwards ass people there are. And I only say that from they're just following the rules, right? And I think that's a lot of government agencies. They get into that quote unquote, we're just kind of following this guy, right? Because no one's in there going to make a big change unless someone from the top is pushing that change. So, even when you take the exams, and I took my IFR and the stuff they ask you is current to today, but really not current to today. And it's like you've got now all glass cockpits and Cirrus. My plane's got one, jets, and we're not dealing with all these and what they call six packs, where it's all like different steam gauges that are all pressure sensitive. And so, I mean, there's a lot in airplanes. And I have to tell you, Garmin, they should go to Garmin and they should say, what do we need to do to help you guys make a better strategy? And I know it's a whole capitalism thing, and I know we're always like, oh, this is going to be bad if they do this. But when you look at it, Garmin to me leads the pack in airspace, controls for airplanes. Why would the government not go to those guys? Because nothing against our government. I mean, I got plenty against our government, but nothing against our government, but they never seem to do everything all the way through, right? And I think it's because it comes in stages. It comes in, this president's here for 4 years. What changes can I make in 4 years, right? Or and then the next guy deletes all the changes. So it's like these guys get stuck in this ever spinning cycle of crap, right? Oh, well, we're just going to kick it down the road. Even the, and it's funny, I probably shouldn't say this either, but all the tests that you take as a pilot actually have answers out on the main, like, the main universe. You can find an answer to all those tests. You can find the question and you can find the answers that they ask.
Just out there on the web.
They may not be in order, but they are exactly the same ones because these people over the years, these questions haven't changed. So they're grabbing this as the pilot walks out and he goes, "Oh, I didn't see that one." And they're updating the site or updating the study materials, which to me I think is great because a lot of this stuff is useless to pilots. But
Sounds
we need
like
to.
a great AI query.
Oh yeah, right.
Give me my test questions.
Yeah, well, and there's one company out there that really does this well, and I'm not going to mention names or anything, but they've collected all this data. And to tell you the truth, I think it's a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in others. It's the bad thing is it's got all these questions from the past that aren't really relevant to today's pilot and today's training. Which now goes into, updating all these systems, right? This is a system that needs updating. We need to ask relevant questions to what pilots are facing today, not shutting the engines down and the guy going, "Did you shut the engines down?"
Because the technology is different today?
Right. I mean, and it's ever growing, but boy, and I'm not sure if the government's gone to Garmin and said, but I for one, I use Garmin stuff in everything. I mean, I spend thousands of dollars on Garmin.
And you would think that'd be logical. I mean, the government outsources a lot of stuff to private companies. I mean,
Well,
Microsoft,
look at
probably
military
Oracle,
might. That's not made by our government.
Right. Yeah, you've got these massive contractors to do all that. I mean, those are the companies that are building missiles that can stop at a red light if you need.
But the problem is it needs government oversight too. Kind of like building all these, and I drive an electric car, right? So does Chris. Building all these electric charging stations and giving billions of dollars to that.
Right.
and then no
Having like
oversight,
9.
and they create one.
Yeah.
It's like,
I think
where
there
did the
were
money
about
go?
9 that went up.
Okay, nine.
Oh,
Nine.
billions
Woo,
of
wow.
dollars. Yeah.
I could have probably created 9 in my sleep, if I had the right people.
Mm-hmm. Right,
But-
exactly.
But that's the problem. Also, another problem, finding the right people to do these jobs.
So when you're flying around and say the president comes to town or vice president,
Sure.
how do you know, like, when does the air traffic control let you know, like, hey,
No, it'll show you even on your you'll go out and it'll tell you where the areas are where you're not allowed to go, right? And it's eluding me at this point.
and that's all through the Garmin stuff or what?
No, it's through the maps. It's through I use ForeFlight. In ForeFlight, it'll tell you. Like there was one time I was flying over by a city here, and the president was going there or something, and they had the city completely in this zone where you couldn't fly from here to here or any times. And I remember I was flying to another town, which is kind of skimming that, right? And I'm listening to the same channel that other people are communicating on. And I remember hearing this guy go, you violated the area, take down my phone number, you need to call me, to some pilot out there. And he was like, I didn't realize that it was there. Well, you got to read the data.
So you like in with a lot of things, when you have a license, you have to renew your license. You have to do continuing ed or whatever. So you have to do continuing ed, I presume,
Every
to be a
2
pilot?
years, biannual review.
So-
Yep.
Because
I think I'm coming up on mine. I got to go check my log.
I've heard stories of some of these small pilots out there who really shouldn't have their license.
Wow, it's funny you say that because I kind of feel like if you don't fly the airplane, don't trust that you remember how to fly the airplane, right? And I took 20 years off of flying from college, starting a business, raising kids, and then I decided I'd go back at it, right? But I could tell you, I had my license, but there was no way I was getting into a plane and flying a plane because there's no way I could have remembered all this. Now it's like, it's instilled. I try to go flying once a week. I try to fly more than once a week, but, being that I got a pretty pressing schedule now.
So have you come across some guys up in the sky? I mean,
All the time.
where all of a sudden it's like,
I've
buddy.
had people turn into my path. Just the other day, I was flying to a town, and I was coming home, and I see this airplane rummaging around, and he's at the same altitude, I was flying VFR, which there's certain altitudes you fly when you go a certain direction. He was flying at me, going on I guarantee he was flying VFR, and he was at my altitude coming towards me, and I was at the right altitude going towards him. He flew right into my path, and then I'm like, oh, he's 7 miles. But when you're doing 170 miles an hour, 7 miles goes like real quick. So then you veer off and, get out of his way, and he's rummaging around, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And that could, he probably doesn't have ADS-B, which is like a way for our systems, but they're not always infallible, right? A way for our airplanes to know where another guy is. But he had it on his plane. Now I'm thinking about it. He had to have it because I was reading him. But he just came right at me. I just had to swerve out of the way. And I've had a lot of that. I had a guy cross. Well, and these are stories for another time, I'm sure.
But so what happens? If one of these guys flies, say you're buzzing, through the sky, and you get one of these guys who's not paying attention or whatever, and flies, kind of in front of you, maybe a couple mile in front of you or something, just too close for comfort. But these things leave wakes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You get stuck. Like there was that.
But this again is that
crash.
uncontrolled airspace, right?
Yeah.
And not that there's not rules to it, but it's very uncontrolled. Like I was flying down to Birmingham, Alabama, and I was getting ready to land at this airport. I was in the pattern. I'm making all my calls, and here comes some guy out of nowhere in a faster airplane than me, cutting across the airport that I was coming into at altitude for landing, basically to get into the airport, and never making a single phone call that he was transitioning the airspace. So I had no idea. He flew right in front of me, right? I actually saw him. I pulled back the throttle to slow down, and he cut right through me.
So is that like, I mean, do you experience like some major turbulence or what happened? What's it
No,
like being in
it's there's nothing. I mean, these are two small airplanes.
that? Okay.
You'll get that off a jet or
Right.
a turbine or something like that, but nothing. Yeah.
And so,
And don't I'm going to tell you, don't get me wrong. We all make mistakes in flying. I made one the other day, and it wasn't life ending or anything, but there's just sometimes you're just not thinking right.
and so to get your license, you got to do what, like 50 hours of class time and like what,
Man,
a couple hundred hours?
I don't know what it is
You
now.
went to college, didn't you like get college credits for doing this?
I did. I got that was the thing that allowed me to graduate from college. Yep. So
one thing you
it was
liked.
my last 7 hours, and I was lucky enough that that's a story in itself. But yeah, so I mean, I basically got my license over a 6-month span. I want to say it was like 50 hours of classroom for my private, and I think I ended up having 40 or 50 hours of flight time to get my private.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then there's so many different levels. Like you're trying to get your commercial now, right? But there's different.
Yeah, I just haven't taken the test. Yeah.
Commercial too. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you have to go through, and thank God they have to jump through all these hoops. But although I think some people push these kids through school, thinking that they're gonna, really make rational decisions, and I've seen a couple of that bite people in the butt.
So actually, speaking of planes, what's going on with Southwest Airlines?
Southwest Airlines. Well, I find this a kind of an interesting thing because I've been watching a lot of YouTube on it. And now they don't have they have assigned seats now. Now they're charging for baggage. Now, it's funny because Southwest used to be the pinnacle of flying a low-cost carrier, right? And I don't even know if they were really low cost at any time. I always found like they were kind of in the same realm. I know there's other airlines I don't fly, United. I'm not going to say any names. But, I just feel like private equity gets a hold of these companies like this, and they completely change the focus. And I think it's been kind of a disaster for them lately.
I always like that. I love their seating process where you get a number and you stand in line and
See, and I didn't.
So if you were organized, because the rule was 24 hours, you jump in. So as long as you're like setting your alarm or whatever to say, okay, it's time to jump in and sign in, then they kind of added this other program. Well, you can do the early bird check-in. And then, like the last time I flew Southwest, which was probably about 3 months ago or so, 4 months ago, something like that.
Right.
I think they've changed their seating system now, but
Yeah, I think you can select seating.
it seems like 90% of the plane paid that extra $20 to get the early bird seating, which obviously defeats the purpose. And
Right.
it's just
I wonder if they're going
how
to
quickly
lose
you-
revenue off of that whole model, right?
Right.
The thing is, I'd rather have an assigned seat. One, we've had flights, and my wife and I actually play this game. We have flights all the time. We try to book 24 hours. We try to go on and register, but sometimes you just forget, and you set your alarm, and then you get on there, and you always get how can I be in C? I just got on. It's only 1 minute past the hour, and I'm already at C, and I know everyone else jumped on before me, but it's even when I'm dead on, I never got higher than A 57 or whatever, right? I would have loved to see A1, that would have been kind of funny, but
yeah, it seemed like A1 through 15 were always guaranteed to be sold out by the early bird check.
right. And I don't think I ever paid for early bird.
And so
I guess I'm just too cheap.
yeah. And the as long as one person in the party can get an aisle or a window, then it's not so bad if you have to get stuck in the middle seat between strangers. But
Well, I've got my wife who never wants to sit in the middle seat, and she's small. And she's like, no, so we always have to split seats, even when we select seats.
I just ask her to slide over, so
Yeah.
give you more space.
Yeah.
So but Southwest, they were having those issues with the computer systems. I mean, I mean, it was a real shit show.
Well, I
couple
think
years ago,
I think a
right?
lot of those systems are outdated as well.
And
You know,
so,
running
yeah,
these companies.
I wonder if that was like just before the buyout, or I don't know when the buyout happened.
Near do I. Near do I.
But that was, if it was right before the buyout, that was a ticking time bomb for that company, because that was horrible.
Yeah.
That was really bad. I got stuck in one of those disasters once because of their system being all messed up.
Right. You know what? And let's specifically say they're not the worst, right? They're not the worst.
They're not
I mean,
rated the worst, no.
yeah. And I'm not going to say any names, Frontier,
Yeah.
but or Spirit. I'm not going to say any
They filed
names.
bankruptcy, I think.
Spirit, yeah. And it's funny because they filed it once before on it, and I was stuck on one of those flights. It took me 4 hours to get my luggage off of that thing, in Chicago.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and, there's a lot of turmoil there, right?
right.
But and if we could streamline the government process with the independent companies, maybe it'll help them, right? Maybe this whole government, fixing, the towers, the controllers. And I mean, controllers have always been a problem. Back, when Reagan and they striked and Reagan said, go back to work. It's always been, and don't get me wrong, I know controllers and they're really nice people and I get it. It's a tough job,
It's gotta be
job.
stressful.
Yeah.
You're dealing with thousands of lives.
Yeah, I would
Those
not.
guys in D.C. who I couldn't imagine working at that tower that was controlling those planes. When you start hearing about, well, the military gets to fly right here, and then commercial flights are like just right above it or whatever. It's just, who designed that?
Why? Why do we even put these guys in this mess, right?
Right.
Is there not another place they can train farther out?
Well, good. I think that kind of wraps up our discussion for today.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Great first one, Appreciate you guys joining in. If you please comment, we want this to be kind of a community of people coming together to just talk about stuff,
make sure to follow and subscribe, and we'll keep on producing content, at least one per week.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate all your time today and appreciate you giving it to us. And we'll see you on the next show.
Alrighty.
Bye.